Have you ever really thought about it? How our ancestors, with literally just rocks and sticks, somehow managed to build, well, everything? Today, we're doing more than just looking at an old tool. We're diving into the birth of engineering itself. Let's break down the absolute genius behind the very first complex tool.
So how do you do it? How do you take a simple stone and turn it into something that can change the world? I mean, when you see a rock on the ground, it's just a rock, right? But for our ancestors, that rock was the key to unlocking the entire world. And today, we're going to get into the incredible knowledge that turned that humble stone into the foundation of civilization itself.
Okay, so you might be thinking, it's a stone axe. You just smash some rocks together, right? But honestly, the reality is so much more elegant than that. This isn't about brute force at all. It's actually a masterful blend of geology, a little bit of physics, and yeah, even botany.
So where do you even start? Well, you can forget about just mindlessly smashing things together. The very first step, the most critical one, is all about selection. It's about knowing exactly what you're looking for. See, to build a great tool, you first have to become a master of your materials.
Believe it or not, you actually need two totally different kinds of stone for this job. First, you've got the core. That's the one that's going to become the actual blade. It has to be special. Then, you need a hammerstone. This is the tool you'll use to shape the core. The easiest way to think about it is this. One stone is chosen because it breaks perfectly, and the other is chosen because it's designed to pretty much never break.
Okay, let's get into the really cool part, the incredible science that makes a piece of rock sharp. I mean, this is where you realize our ancestors weren't just banging rocks together. They were brilliant, practical geologists, even if they didn't have all the fancy words we have for it today.
So here it is. This is the secret sauce, something called a conchoidal fracture. It sounds complicated, but it's this kind of magical property. See, instead of just crumbling into dust, certain stones break in this really predictable, curved way, almost like the inside of a seashell. And it's this controlled breaking that lets you flake off these perfect little pieces to create an edge that is, get this, literally sharper than a modern surgical scalpel. No joke.
And this quote really drives the point home. Think about it. A diamond is the hardest thing on the planet, right? So you'd think it would make the best knife. But nope, it's actually terrible for this because it just shatters unpredictably. The real genius here wasn't about finding the hardest rock. It was about finding a rock that would break in a way you could control.
So what are we looking for then? What kinds of rocks have this amazing property? Well, we're talking about stuff with a super dense, uniform structure, kind of like glass. Obsidian is the classic example. It's basically volcanic glass. But you also have chert, flint, jasper. These are the materials that let a tool maker just peel off flakes with incredible precision. It's how you shape the blade.
Okay, now for the other half of our dynamic duo, the hammerstone. This guy needs to be the total opposite of the blade stone. You want something tough, dense, something that can take a real beating. You know those smooth, rounded river cobbles? Perfect. But here's the really clever bit. Your hammerstone should actually be a little bit softer than your core. Why? So that when you strike, all that energy goes into the core to flake it instead of just bouncing back into your hammer in your hand.
All right, we've got our super sharp stone blade, fantastic. But a blade by itself is still just a sharp rock. To really unlock its power, to turn it into a tool that can fell a tree, you need leverage. You need a handle. And you guessed it. Just like the stone, the kind of wood you choose is absolutely critical.
Yeah, you can't just grab any old stick you find. Imagine spending hours crafting this beautiful axe head, and then you attach it to a piece of, say, pine. What happens on the first swing? Snap! It's gone. Softwoods like pine or cedar are just way too brittle. You absolutely need dense, fibrous hardwoods. We're talking ash, hickory, oak, woods that can absorb that incredible shock of impact over and over without shattering.
And here's another one of those pro tips from our ancestors. The best way to do this isn't to just carve a handle out of a big log. Why? Because that cuts right across the wood grain, which makes it weak. No, the smarter way is to find a live branch that's already the perfect thickness. That way, all the wood grain is intact, running the full length of the handle, which makes it incredibly strong. And hey, if you get really lucky, you find one with a natural fork or a thick knot at the end, the perfect ready-made slot for your axe head.
All right, so we've got the perfect stone, we've got the perfect piece of wood. Now for what is honestly the most complex part of the whole process, bringing them together, fusing them into one. This is where our ancestors went from geologists and botanists to chemists and physicists, creating a bond designed to withstand unbelievable force.
First things first, you need glue.
But we're not talking about some simple tree sap. This is basically a primitive epoxy, a composite material. Here's the recipe. You start with pine resin and you heat it up gently so it gets nice and liquid. But that alone is too soft, so you mix in finely crushed hardwood charcoal. That acts as a hardener. And then, for the final touch, you add some kind of fine fiber, and that acts like rebar in concrete, giving it incredible strength. What you end up with is this rock-solid cement.
But that amazing glue? That's just step one. To really truly lock this thing together, our ancestors used an absolutely brilliant mechanical trick. What they do is take animal sinew or a strip of rawhide and soak it in water until it got all soft and stretchy. Then they'd wrap it as tightly as they possibly could around the joint, crisscrossing it over and over, and then they just had to wait. Because as that wet rawhide or sinew starts to dry, it shrinks. And this is the mind-blowing part. It doesn't just get a little snug. It clamps down with an immense amount of pressure. We're talking a vice-like grip that is so incredibly powerful it's almost impossible to break. It's a natural, self-tightening clamp. Just brilliant.
So after all that incredible knowledge, the geology, the physics, the botany, the chemistry, what do you have at the end of the day? You have something that would literally, fundamentally change the course of human history.
Because the finished tool, what we call a hafted axe, it's so much more than just its parts. It's not just a sharp rock tied to a stick. It's a true composite tool. It's a system where every single piece, the stone, the wood, the glue, the binding, makes all the other parts stronger. It represents a whole new level of understanding and mastery over the natural world.
And what does this new power let you do? Well, pretty much everything. With the kind of leverage and force you get from an axe, you can do something that was nearly impossible before. You can cut down a tree. And that one ability opens the door to everything else. You can build real shelters. You can craft better tools. You can make bigger, hotter, longer-lasting fires. It's not an exaggeration to say this is the very beginning of civilization as we know it.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? This incredible piece of technology wasn't invented in a lab. It was born from just paying attention, from careful observation and a really deep understanding of the world right around them. It proves that true ingenuity isn't about having the fanciest materials. It's about seeing the incredible potential in what's already there. So it leaves us with a pretty big question. If our ancestors could create all this with just rocks, wood, and sap, what amazing potential are we overlooking right in front of us today?